K initiative.
In our headlines on this Friday, July 31st, here in South Korea. South Korea and Chile agreed to restart talks on upgrading their free trade agreement as President Lee Jae-myung and President Jose Antonio Kast seek to strengthen economic ties during their summit in Santiago. Here at home, the South Korean stock market stages a solid comeback on this Friday, soaring well over 17% as investors respond optimistically to overnight gains on Wall Street. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says that a deal has been drawn for Hamas to disarm and for Israel to withdraw from Gaza, but uncertainty remains. Trade topped the agenda as President Lee Jae-myung and President Jose Antonio Kast met in Santiago, that is, where the two leaders agreed to revive talks on updating their free trade agreement after a decade. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
The summit began with an official welcome at the presidential palace in Santiago for the South Korean first couple. President Lee was the first Korean president to visit Chile in 11 years. Upgrading the bilateral free trade agreement was a focal point of Thursday's summit between President Lee Jae-myung and his Chilean counterpart, Jose Antonio Kast. Chile was the first country to sign an FTA with South Korea in 2004, and the deal hasn't been updated since then.
양국은 한칠레 FTA 자유무역위원회를 10년 만에 재가동하여 통상 투자 현안을 점검하고 고해적인 한칠레 FTA 개선 등을 포함한 양국의 통상 관계 증진 방안에 대해서 협의해 나가기로 하였습니다.
We agreed to resume the Korea-Chile Free Trade Commission, last held 10 years ago, to seek a roadmap to modernize and upgrade bilateral ties to a higher level.
They also held in-depth discussions over major economic frameworks, including the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Pacific Alliance. The leaders also agreed to promote partnership in critical mineral supply chains, for which an MOU was signed for cooperation on mineral resources.
세계 1위 구리 생산국이자 1위 리튬 매장국인 주요 자원 부국 칠레와 반도체, 배터리 등 첨단 산업 선도국인 우리 한국은 핵심 광물 공급망 구축에 있어서 자연스럽고 이상적인 파트너임이 분명합니다.
On infrastructure, Lee and Kast also agreed to further cooperate on the Chacao Bridge building project, Chile's flagship national project, in which a South Korean builder is taking part. MOUs were signed for cooperation on Antarctic research and maritime safety.
Chile aims to make inroads into the South Pole. I once again invite President Yi to visit the South Pole, together with me. As for cooperation on icebreakers, I hope to contribute more for greater technological advancement.
Cooperation on science and technology, people-to-people exchanges, and K-culture will be further promoted. He asked his Chilean counterpart for unwavering support for resolving North Korea's nuclear issues, and Kast agreed to work together for peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. On Friday, President Yi will hold a summit with Argentine President Javier Milei over in Buenos Aires, the final leg of his three-nation trip to South America. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Santiago.
And here at home, the South Korean stock market staged a solid comeback today as investors reacted to overnight gains on Wall Street. Our Kim Jun-ong covers Friday's trade.
Korea's stock market saw a sharp double-digit gain on Friday, rebounding from days of steep losses. The benchmark KOSPI closed 17.91% higher at 6,595.45. The index gained more than 1,000 points in a single day, setting a new record by surpassing the 11.95% rise seen during the 2008 global financial crisis. Trading opened with a sharp rally, prompting buy-side sidecars on both the KOSPI and Kosdaq minutes after the opening bell. The tech-heavy Kosdaq also saw a sharp rise, closing 11.63% higher. Overnight gains in U.S. semiconductor shares spilled over into Korean stocks, with Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix leading the way. The two closed 26% and 29% up, respectively. The turnaround followed Microsoft's solid earnings overnight, which eased concerns over the durability of AI investment. Rebound buying fueled the rally, with foreign investors returning as heavy buyers after weeks of selling.
Friday's rally came as investors returned to an oversold market. Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix had suffered sharp declines in recent sessions, but as some of the concerns eased, bargain buying quickly gained momentum.
The KOSPI has undergone sharp fluctuations since climbing above the 9,300 mark in late June. After 3 straight days of heavy selling sent the index down to the 5,500 level by Thursday's close, Friday's gains brought a dramatic reversal. Analysts say next month's regulatory changes for overseas leveraged products could help reduce market volatility.
Hong Kong-listed leveraged ETFs tied to Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix fueled foreign buying in the Korean market, but also amplified volatility. New leverage caps taking effect next week are expected to reduce ETF-driven intraday swings.
Still, some warn it is too soon to call full recovery in semiconductor investment sentiment. Concerns over the sustainability of AI spending and an uncertain U.S. economic outlook are expected to leave the market's near-term direction unclear. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the Korean economy saw a strong monthly rebound in June as production, consumption, and investment all returned to growth. Park Chun-han has details.
The Korean economy delivered a broadly positive set of triple growth numbers in June, with production, consumption, and investment all rising for the first time in 3 months. According to data released by the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Friday, overall industrial production jumped 2.3% from the previous month. This marks the sharpest monthly increase in 6 years, rebounding from May's fall of 0.3% due to a base effect in semiconductor production. June's growth was largely driven by a 4.5% rebound in semiconductor output and a massive 15.4% jump in automobile production. The ministry explained that the auto sector benefited from the normalization of parts supply and strong demand driven by the launch of new models of car. Retail sales, a key indicator of private consumption, also climbed 2.7%. This was backed by robust automobile purchases and special promotional events by major tech companies like Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics, which boosted demand for home appliances and computers.
June's industrial activity saw a 6.4% increase in production from the previous month, driven largely by a 15.4% jump in automobile output as parts supply normalized. This not only boosted production, but also lifted retail sales of passenger vehicles and increased facility investment in the auto sector.
Facility investment also grew 5.8% compared to the previous month. The increase was largely due to heavy investments in machinery for semiconductor manufacturing and transportation equipment. With all three major sectors showing a steady rebound, the positive momentum could revitalize broader domestic industries moving forward. However, if external uncertainties continue to persist and escalate further, the positive output seen in June could lose momentum and negatively affect the second half of the year. 박준환, Arirang News.
The government will launch a Korean-style strategic sovereign wealth fund worth over $14 billion next year. According to the Finance Ministry on this Friday, the fund will invest in key strategic industries, including aerospace, artificial intelligence, defense, and semiconductors. The initiative aims to secure stable, long-term investment returns by leveraging government assets and capturing the growing interest of global investors. Investment returns will be shared with the public by utilizing operating profits for reinvestment, government dividends, and national treasury returns. U.S. President Donald Trump claims Hamas has agreed to fully disarm, but regional tensions remain in place as renewed U.S. and Iranian military strikes raise fresh concerns about a broader confrontation. And Sung-jin has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Hamas has agreed to fully disarm, describing the move as a historic breakthrough toward lasting peace in Gaza. In a post on Truth Social, Trump announced that the Board of Peace, an organization he established to oversee Gaza's reconstruction, had reached an agreement with Hamas and other groups in the enclave for their complete disarmament. Trump called the deal a monumental step that would pave the way for Gaza to be governed by a new Palestinian administration working alongside the Board of Peace to rebuild the territory. Hamas confirmed the agreement, marking a major shift after years of rejecting calls to disarm. A senior Hamas official told the BBC that they have agreed to completely disarm in Gaza, as the new National Committee for the Administration of Gaza will now oversee the registration, storage, and management of all weapons. This organization will become the sole authority permitted to possess or control arms in Gaza, while Hamas's negotiator said Israel will have no role in the disarmament process. However, Israel has yet to officially endorse the agreement. U.S. officials told reporters that President Trump would be very disappointed if Israel failed to uphold to the agreement. Meanwhile, the fragile pause in fighting between the United States and Iran has come to an abrupt end, with both sides continuing military strikes. Both sides fired barrages of missiles on Thursday, with the U.S. military saying it launched attacks against military command centers and missile facilities after Iran fired missiles at U.S. bases in the region. The conflict is now spreading beyond the Persian Gulf and Red Sea, with 2 vessels struck by drones near Egypt, and Saudi Arabia already joining its first joint military operation with U.S. forces in the Red Sea. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy believes that Russia deployed a North Korean missile for an overnight assault, marking the first time such a weapon has been launched in nearly a year. According to foreign media outlets, including Reuters, Zelenskyy acknowledged that further investigation would be needed to confirm this belief. Nonetheless, he strongly denounced Pyongyang and Moscow for the alleged attack that took at least 9 lives, including those of 2 children. Prime Minister Han Sang-suk has called for continued vigilance within government agencies as the current dangerous heat is set to worsen next week. Speaking at a related meeting earlier on this Friday, she also called for efforts to ease the impact of the prolonged heat wave for vulnerable groups, including the elderly, as well as outdoor and delivery workers, while closely monitoring water supplies in drought-prone areas. Members of the public have also been asked to avoid outdoor activities during the hottest part of the day. Meanwhile, another day of dangerous heat is unfolding across South Korea after record-breaking temperatures pushed parts of the southeast above 40 degrees Celsius for a second day in a row. Our Sejong Center covers the scorching weather.
The intense summer heat is expected to continue through the final day of July, with dangerously high temperatures and tropical nights gripping most of South Korea. Record-breaking heat continued across the country's southeast on Thursday. In Yangsan, the mercury reached 40.3 degrees Celsius for the second straight day, marking the first time since 2018 that a location in South Korea recorded temperatures above 40 degrees on consecutive days. It was also the highest temperature ever recorded there since weather observations began. Nearby cities also saw historic heat. Kimhae climbed to 39 degrees Celsius, its hottest July day on record, while Busan followed Wednesday's all-time high of 38.8 degrees with another blistering 38.3 degrees, making it the city's second hottest day ever. Changwon and Ulsan also recorded some of their highest temperatures since modern weather records began. The Korea Meteorological Administration says Friday will remain extremely hot, with daytime highs ranging from 32 to 37 degrees Celsius. Most of the country is expected to endure another day of intense heat and tropical nights, with mostly sunny skies in the south and on Jeju Island. Health officials are urging people to take extra precautions as the prolonged heat wave continues. Since mid-May, more than 1,600 people have been treated for heat-related illnesses, with 12 deaths. Although the total number of people affected is lower than during the same period last year, the death toll is already close to last year's figure, indicating that this summer's heat has led to more severe cases. Forecasters warn the dangerous conditions are likely to persist, with little relief expected in the coming days. 이승재, Arirang News.
In other news now, South Korea is planning to turn K-pop's global appeal into an annual music celebration as the construction of a venue exclusively for K-pop concerts nears completion. Our Cho Young-eun files this report.
As Blackpink headlines Coachella, Stray Kids take over Lollapalooza Chicago, and BTS draws massive crowds in Seoul, K-pop continues to dominate some of the world's biggest stages. But while fans travel the world for major music festivals, Korea has never had a venue designed to bring global fans to the birthplace of K-pop. That is set to change with Seoul Arena, construction now well underway in the capital's Dobong-gu district. Scheduled to open in the first half of next year, South Korea's first large-scale venue dedicated to K-pop music will seat around 18,000 people with a maximum capacity of 28,000.
Once completed, Seoul Arena is expected to become more than just a concert venue. It aims to be a global hub for live entertainment, attracting major international events and music fans from around the world.
The festival, called Phenomenon, will be held from December 2nd through the 12th next year at Seoul Arena and Kintex in Goyang, Gyeongsangnam-do Province. Combining the words fan and phenomenon to convey the meaning fan-created phenomenon, the event will include K-pop concerts featuring artists from the rosters of SM, YG, JYP, and HYBE, and a fan award ceremony.
Simply put, Phenomenon is a large-scale K-culture festival that brings together the strengths of Korea's diverse cultural industries.
According to the Cultural Ministry, the event is expected to attract around 520,000 visitors, including 200,000 overseas tourists, generating an estimated 1 trillion won, or $690 million in economic impact.
Our goal is not only to strengthen Korea's cultural industry, but also to bring young people around the world closer together through culture. That's why the 4 major K-pop companies have joined forces for the first time.
Many overseas fans say a large-scale festival featuring multiple K-pop artists would be a strong reason to visit Korea.
But the venue, I think they can make, I don't know how it's gonna look, but I think it should be big enough for at least hold, because K-pop fans are like a lot in here. But I do think it will attract more people, like, because I know a lot of people come here only to have concerts because it's maybe...
So yeah, because I was actually talking to my husband. I was like, hey, look, there's a Korean Coachella happening. Like, would you be interested? So we're planning on like maybe coming, but depending on where the stadium is. And
as Seoul Arena nears completion, expectations are growing that Korea can turn its global K-pop popularity into a sustainable concert tourism industry. 조영은, Arirang News.
And one of Seoul's premier performing arts venues is inviting foreign visitors backstage for a chance to experience Korean culture from a different perspective. Our Shin So-eun was there.
Imagine standing at the center of a grand stage as the lights sparkle and everyone's attention is fixed on you. For most people, a trip to the theater begins when the curtain rises. But here, visitors have a first-hand experience behind the scenes of the spectacle. Highlighting its theatrical legacy, the Sejong Center for the Performing Arts, located in Gwanghwamun Square in the heart of Seoul, invites foreigners to a backstage tour that brings Korea's culture together in one immersive event.
I see performances as one of the most powerful forms of experiential content. As artists at work behind the scenes during the day, I wanted to reveal the mechanisms behind the scenes through this tour.
Considered Korea's largest performing arts venue, the auditorium can accommodate more than 3,000 people. The magnificent sounds are all produced from one side of the auditorium, which drew inspiration from a Korean traditional string instrument called komungo.
I'm the type of person I want to learn something very deeply and very thoroughly. My impression after leaving here is that it's interesting how there's been some Western influence, but still faithfulness to Korean tradition.
Echoing the curved eaves of mainstream Korean architecture and orchestra, the Sejong Center hosts global art forms such as opera and ballet. Spaces normally hidden from the audience further deepen visitors' curiosity.
Seeing the backstage areas and costumes up close was incredible. The theater was so beautiful that I'd love to come back for a performance.
Foreign visitors are drawn to the beauty of restraint in Korean dance.
In Korean dance, the fan can become a brush, a prop, or even a way to express the movement of air. I hope these details resonate with visitors and evoke a wide range of cultural emotions.
By stepping behind the curtain, audiences can get a glimpse of how Korean performances come to life. With foreign arrivals surpassing 10 million in the first half of the year, tours like this can turn theaters into a new K-culture destinations. Shin So-eun, Arirang News.
This is the world now. European soccer's governing body has voted to boycott all World Cup tournaments if FIFA pushes forward with its plan to sell stakes to private investors. UEFA's 55 member nations voted unanimously on Thursday to boycott the 2027 Women's World Cup in Brazil and the 2030 Men's World Cup. The move aims to stop FIFA President Gianni Infantino's $20 billion FIFA subsidiary plan, which would hand 20% ownership to external investors, including Joshua Kushner's Thrive Capital. North America's governing body, CONCACAF, and its 41 member nations also rejected the plan on Thursday. The U.S. economy grew at a 1.5% annual rate from April through June, down from 2.1% in the first quarter and short of what forecasters expected. The drag came from the artificial intelligence boom as chips and data center equipment are largely built overseas, and imports count against the growth calculation. Trade alone subtracted a full percentage point. Household spending accelerated to a 3.2% pace, and business investment was robust. Inflation cooled in June to 3.7%, a decline from 4.1% in May. In Pakistan, a coal mine explosion has killed at least 11 miners. A methane gas explosion tore through the coal complex in Balochistan province on Thursday. 36 men were inside the section that collapsed. 25 of them are still unaccounted for. Rescue teams are digging more than a kilometer below the surface. The province's chief mines inspector says crews are still hoping to find survivors, but said, quote, chances are low. In Prague, zookeepers dumped tons of ice into the polar bear enclosure on Thursday amid the sweltering heat. The zoo started handing out ice 2 years ago as the number of extremely hot days piled up. Staff had planned this year's deliveries for July and August, but the first heat wave arrived early. And in June, the Czech Republic recorded its hottest day ever, close to 42 degrees Celsius on June 28th. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
It'll have only taken a few minutes outside today before being drenched in sweat. The country is still in the grip of an intense heat wave. Earlier today, Yangsan in Gyeongsangnam-do Province soared to 41.4 degrees Celsius, setting a new all-time national temperature record. And the heat isn't letting up tomorrow either. Yangsan could climb back to around 40 degrees Celsius. And all that daytime heat isn't going anywhere after sunset, so make sure you're staying cool both day and night. Tomorrow, UV levels will climb into the very high category in many areas, and ozone levels will be bad nationwide. So try to avoid outdoor activities as much as you can and stay hydrated. As for temperatures, Seoul will start the day at 26 degrees Celsius, Daejeon 25 and Daegu 27 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 34 degrees, Daegu 37 degrees, Busan 38 degrees. Early next week, the most intense heat will spread into western regions, including the capital. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at the hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so thank you for now.
President Lee Jae-myung's Latin American diplomacy takes him to Chile for a summit with his counterpart Jose Antonio Kast, during which they agreed to resume a joint committee to upgrade their free trade pact. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Friday, July 31st here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. South Korea is stepping up its diplomacy on multiple fronts. President Lee Jae-myung is strengthening ties with Latin America during his three-nation tour there, while Seoul unveils a new peace-first approach toward Pyongyang. We'll take a closer look at what these developments mean for regional security and South Korea's foreign policy. For this, I have Stephen Bork with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Stephen, welcome back.
Nice to be here, as always.
I also have Professor Park Won-gon at Ewha Women's University live on the line. Professor Park, as always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Stephen, we start here in the studio. Let's begin then with the summit between the leaders of South Korea and Chile. What did they discuss?
The headline that came out of the summit was that they agreed to strengthen cooperation on lithium and copper supply chains. So Chile is has large reserves of these mineral items, and South Korea is always in the market to, particularly, in the past few years, we've really seen the importance of diversifying supply chains and, not wherever possible, not relying exclusively on one destination for a particular mineral that's really integral to the production of any of South Korea's main export items. So this is the kind of diplomacy that I think forms sort of the backbone of South Korean foreign policy, which is, every South Korean president does this kind of thing, whatever their ideological differences, whether you have a conservative president in power or a progressive, they tend to go around the world and present South Korea as a partner, a state that is interested in buying whatever mineral elements or whatever other kind of products that country has, and is looking to develop its own presence in that country as an exporter and as a country that has a lot of companies that do business overseas, and looking to facilitate those companies' operations in those places. So, yeah, there's a pretty obvious kind of overlap in interest between South Korea and a country like Chile, just because, as I said, South Korea imports a lot of raw materials that Chile is quite abundant in, and is always looking to identify countries that have growing middle classes like those in Latin America, that they can develop its own markets for its exports, to sell appliances or LCD screens or mobile phones or whatever it happens to be. So pretty cordial proceedings over there today, I think.
Right, indeed. Professor Park, generally speaking, what were some of your takeaways from this particular summit?
Well, I'd like to point to three takeaways. First, this was a summit about the economic security and specifically about the critical minerals, as just Stephen mentioned. President Jose Antonio Kast himself framed copper and lithium as the indispensable to Korea's electric vehicles and semiconductor chips, and even quoted the Korean proverb, "Two hands are better than one," to describe minerals cooperation as a shared task of stabilizing global supply chains. For Korea, which imports virtually all of these inputs, Chile, the world's leading copper and lithium producers, is about as close to an ideal partner as you can find, and the two industry ministers signed a minerals partnership MOU on the spot. Second, the summit modernized and institutionalized institutional foundation of the relationship. Remember, Chile was Korea's very first FTA partner back in the year 2004, and the two leaders agreed to reactivate the Korea-Chile FTA Joint Committee for the first time in 10 years to discuss upgrading the agreement. President Lee has been explicitly that the FTA must evolve to reflect digital trade, AI, clean technologies, and resilient supply chains. So this is really about the converting a 20-year-old goods trade agreement into a 21st century economic security framework. They also discussed cooperation through TPP, Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Pacific Alliance, and DEPA, the Digital Economic Partnership Agreement, which suggests Seoul sees Chile as a gateway into the broader Pacific trade architecture. Third, the relationship is broadening well beyond the trade. Cooperation is expanding into infrastructure, defense industry, and policing, alongside science cooperation and Antarctic research and astronomy in the Atacama Desert. And symbolically, President Kast even invited President Lee to jointly visit Antarctica, noting that Korea's research station operates right next to Chile's. The Chakao Bridge project, being built by Korean companies as a hallmark, a landmark of bilateral cooperation, was singled out by both leaders. And I'd add one diplomatic footnote that matters for us here on the Korean Peninsula. President Lee asked for Chile's continued support on resolving the North Korean nuclear issues and establishing peace. The President Kast committed to working together for peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. Given that this was the first visit by Korean President to Chile in 11 years and the first summit with a brand new Chilean administration, lacking in the baseline of political support early, is a very meaningful achievement in itself.
Right, indeed. Keeping in mind what Professor Park has just said, Stephen, what has been the foreign media's assessment of President Lee Jae-myung's diplomatic initiatives in that part of the world thus far?
Well, I personally would have loved to have seen more coverage of President Lee's meeting with Lula, the Brazilian leader, because those are two leaders who have kind of similar backgrounds. Both come from, have kind of labor experiences and rose to lead their country with a kind of underdog story and facing really concerted opposition from the other side of the political spectrum. I mean, if I was fortunate enough to be traveling with Lee on this trip as a reporter, that's a story that I would have loved to have tackled. But this tends to not be, speaking as somebody who works in foreign media, South Korean relations with Latin America are kind of a hard sell to an international audience just because there's no real tension, there's no real, cross purposes. When a Korean leader goes to the United States or goes to China or goes to Japan, there's a fairly, a much broader kind of context to parse. But when it comes to Korea and Latin America, I think there's just like a lot of goodwill. There's a lot of, we hear a lot about how Korean culture, K-pop, K-dramas are extremely popular in Latin America. I think Koreans kind of admire the, kind of historical and swaggery and kind of cool aspects of Latin America. The two sides seem to get along pretty well. So now when you see a South Korean leader going there, it's just sort of a very logical, very sorts of reasonable things that are coming out. There's no clashing, there's no real fireworks. So it's not something that we're going to see a ton of foreign media coverage of, and the foreign media coverage that we will see is just a kind of a straightforward cataloging of economic and political deals that Professor Park just laid out.
Right. Professor Park, I've been asking this next question to quite a number of pundits this week. How does the Korean leader's outreach to Latin America fit into his broader foreign policy strategy, do you think?
Well, I'd like to frame it with a word that the administration itself uses: pragmatic diplomacy, national interest first, ideology light, and heavily economic. Three strategic logics are very feasible in this tour. The first is supply chain diversification as insurance. Look at the itinerary. This is President Lee's longest trip since taking office, an 11-day two-track journey that began in Silicon Valley with the AI cooperation and then moved to South America for critical minerals and supply chains. Brazil offers rare earth and agricultural goods, Chile's copper and lithium, Argentina shale gas, lithium, and soybeans. In an era of U.S.-China strategic competition, tariff shocks, and weaponized interdependence, Korea is essentially buying insurance, securing stable raw materials, and diversifying markets as supply chains are being restructured. The second logic is what I'd call the global South diplomacy. The president's presidential office has framed this tour explicitly around expanding trade and investment, diversifying critical mineral supply chains, and strengthening global South diplomacy. Korea is positioning itself as a partner that offers technology, infrastructure, and defense industry without geopolitical baggage of the great powers. Brazil next showed the ceiling of this ambition. Seoul and Brasilia agreed to expand the cooperation into defense, aerospace, critical minerals, and semiconductors, to establish a joint defense industry committee, and to pursue a military information sharing agreement. And crucially, they opened the way to reviving the long-stalled Korea-Mercosur trade talks with the working group aiming for a formal restart in December. That would be a genuine strategic prize, preferential access to South America's largest market bloc. Third, this diversification is complemented to not a substitute for the U.S. alliance. Notice that tour began in San Francisco with American big tech, and even the Argentina leg has the alliance dimension. President Milei, his close personal relationship with President Trump, can indirectly reinforce trust within the Korea-US alliance. So the architecture is keep the alliance as anchor, restore ties with China. President Xi declared 2026 the first year of full-scale restoration of Korea-China relations after meeting Xi Jinping in Beijing, and build out a wide portfolio of middle power partnership. Latin America is where the portfolio strategy is most visible because it combines resources, markets, defense experts, and diplomatic support for Korea's peace agenda in one package.
All right, and speaking about Korea's peace agenda, just last week, Stephen, Unification Minister Chung Dong-yong said that Seoul is now opting for a peace-first North Korea policy. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, so specifically what he said was the ultimate goal of denuclearization has not been abandoned, but denuclearization first has. And Professor Park would know a lot more about this than me, but I'm a little bit confused by this because it seems to me that this has basically been the position of the South Korean progressive side for a very long time. They have always kind of said that the way to approach North Korea was to have smaller collaborative projects to build trust, to take steps that establish a certain level of cooperation. And there's a lot of examples over the years. It's sports exchanges at the Olympics, or the Kaesong Industrial Complex, or cross-border tourism. They've always kind of operated that the way to approach North Korea is to not negotiate with the very challenging goal of denuclearization at the forefront of your approach, but to take smaller, more incremental steps that could eventually lead to unification, which is their, the South Korean left side's ultimate goal. So I was a little bit surprised by this because it seemed like he was basically just kind of articulating something that I have been hearing the left wing say for a very long time. I mean, there is a certain logic to it because North Korea has demonstrated that it is quite intent on keeping its nuclear weapons, but I suspect that if he is going to try to carry this out in some sort of practical way, he is going to, the South Korean Ministry of Communication and the government as a whole are going to run into the same kind of roadblock that has been presenting itself for years now, basically ever since Kim Jong-un's failed summit with President Trump in Hanoi, that North Korea is just has shown no interest in these kinds of collaboration projects. They, whether it be the excavation of Korean War veterans from the DMZ, or having kind of working level talks, so the sorts of things that used to be routine. North Korea has not responded to any of those overtures for a long time, and everything that we know about North Koreans' foreign policy nowadays is that they are all in on expanding their ties with Russia and China, and they have shown no interest in engaging with South Korea or the U.S. So. The minister's comments, like I said, there is a certain logic to it, but I wonder how much progress he will really be able to make.
All right, that being said then, Professor Park, do tell us, the Unification Ministry's new Peace First North Korea policy, is it simply reaffirming the Liberal Party's stance with regard to dealing with North Korea, or is it something new? And also, what are your thoughts with regard to the prospects of this policy in engaging North Korea?
Yeah, my answer is it creates the condition for an opening, but not yet the opening itself, because the door has to be unlocked from both sides. Let me first give the policies due. Minister Chong's shift is the recognition of reality. Seoul has abandoned the denuclearization first, while retaining the denuclearization as the ultimate goal, and is developing a strategy that would initially seek to freeze North Korea's nuclear program on the logic that continuous delay only allow Pyongyang to expand its arsenal. The previous approach, as the minister put it, simply failed to bring North Korea back to the table. Every year of stalemate is a year of fissile material accumulation, so front-loading peace and tension reduction while pursuing a freeze is analytically the more realistic sequencing. And there has been small but real signals of reciprocity this year when President Lee expressed regret over a drone incursion incident. Kim Jong-un thought Kim Yo-jong's statement, praised it as the attitude of the candid and bold person, and so assessed that the two leaders intended to hold unnecessary tension-raising act has been confirmed. That tells us that Pyongyang is watching, and that tension management, the peace half of the peace first, is actually functioning. However, here's the hard part: the denuclearization some days have. Just this week, on July 27, Kim Yo-jong denounced the ARF chairman's statements calling for denuclearization as pathetic, declared that clinging to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is a failure of strategic thinking and a foolish delusion, and insisted that North Korea's nuclear status is permanently fixed by Constitution, vowing its nuclear capability will be constantly update without a moment pause. So my assessment is this: peace first has successfully lowered the temperature and reestablished a rudimentary signaling channel between the two leadership. This is nothing after years of hostility, but a genuine diplomatic opening will likely require U.S.-North Korea variable. Because Kim Jong-un's real negotiation counterpart for his nuclear program is Washington, not Seoul. What Seoul is doing sensibly is keeping the peninsula quiet and positioning itself as an indispensable facilitator for the moment that window opens.
Right, and speaking about Kim Jong-un, according to the Wall Street Journal, Stephen, he is upgrading his spy network. Could you tell us a bit about this and its broader implications?
This is another thing that I found kind of confusing, and I'll explain why. This is the Wall Street Journal story is built on a state media missive where Kim called for radical enhancements to North Korea's military reconnaissance and intelligence-seeking abilities. And I don't find it at all strange that he would want to increase those things, because North Korea relies on, covert and under-the-radar information for a lot of different things, for its military activities and also for a lot of the ways that it makes money, such as hacking and cyber scams and all the rest. But what I didn't quite understand was why the state media ran this in a very open and public forum. It strikes me as a little bit counterintuitive for a leader to stand at a podium and say publicly, we are going to expand our spying and we are going to expand our covert activities. It seems like something that you would want to keep quiet. If you want to expand those activities, you can have kind of, backroom private conversations with the relevant officials. I'm not exactly, as with a lot of things with North Korea, you have to, there's a certain reading of the tea leaves. You read what they say and then you try to parse what really they might be trying to accomplish with this, and I think maybe only time will tell there. The other thing that I didn't quite get is, if what they're referring to is conventional espionage, that's going to be harder than ever for North Korea to do nowadays, because they've closed a lot of their embassies. They've really retrenched their global presence, and they've really reduced their interchange with the outside world. There are fewer people coming in, there are fewer North Koreans going out, there are fewer overseas posts where North Korean officials can make inroads in the local community and hear what business people are saying and hear about new opportunities that the country could potentially take advantage of. As I said earlier, everything we've seen from North Korea for a quite long time shows that it's quite happy with the productive nature of its ties with Beijing and Moscow, and it's really focused on those things. So perhaps the implication here is that it's looking to now that it's established these military and technological forms of cooperation with those two countries, it now wants to deepen those into the areas of intelligence gathering, but we'll have to see where they go from here.
All right. In the meantime, then, Professor Park, should the international community view this upgrade in spy network as a bigger long-term threat than the regime's missile tests, do you think?
In the long run, yes, I would take this intelligence upgrade more seriously, and let me explain why. First, look at what's actually happening. At the first enlarged meeting of the party's 9th Central Military Commission, Kim Jong-un called for expanding the functions and missions of the General Reconnaissance and Intelligence Bureau in a radical way. And this bureau is not new bureaucratic wallpaper. It's reorganization of the old Reconnaissance General Bureau into a unified intelligence agency integrating satellite, cyber, signals, and human intelligence, reportedly with authority to report directly to Kim himself. His predecessors was accused of directing the 2010 sinking of Cheonan corvette ships, infiltration operation, and major cyber attacks. So this is the institutional consolidation of North Korea's entire covert toolkit. Second, the strategic context makes it more dangerous than before. Analysts believe Pyongyang intended to apply the military intelligence warfare experience it gains in the Russian-Ukraine war. That experience would go into reconnaissance against South Korea, cyber warfare, and intelligence collection. The move also aims to make up for weak collection capacity by building intelligence sharing ties with Russia and China, with the satellite technology flowing from the Moscow in return for North Korea's war supports. And remember, this comes after Pyongyang's dismantlement of its inter-Korean dialogue institutions under two hostile state lines, meaning South Korea is now treated primarily as an intelligence and military target. Third, and this is the key analytic position point, missiles and espionage sit on different risk curves. Missile tests are visible, countable, and deterrable. Each launch trigger detection, attribution, and response. Intelligence and cyber operation are opposite, invisible, deniable, continuous, and already profitable. North Korea was reportedly behind roughly 2/3 of global crypto theft in the first half of this year alone. That's the sanctions-proof revenue from stream that directly funds for missile program. That said, I resist framing this as either or. The two threats are converging: better satellites, better cyber reconnaissance, and better human network make North Korean missile more accurate, more survivable, and more usable. So the right answer for the international community is treat the expansion of general reconnaissance and the intelligence bureau as a nervous system of missile threat.
Dual threats, then. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Professor Park, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you for having me.
Stephen here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, for now then, we'll continue to follow all related developments closely, from Seoul's evolving diplomatic strategy overseas to the shifting security dynamics here on the Korean Peninsula. Have a great weekend.
It is not extravagant. It isn't even symmetrical.